Well, hello, my friends. Welcome to me, your host, Christian Watson. Hope all of you are doing well today. But for hundreds of thousands of parents across America, and particularly America, because this is a uniquely American problem, they are still scrambling to find sustenance for their children, particularly for their babies. Indeed, over the past few days as of the production of this video, the out of stock rate for baby formula, which has been in crisis, which has been in a very stark shortage crisis across America over the past few weeks to a few months, has gone up to 70%, and some estimates have it even higher. And there have already been cases, my friends, of babies being hospitalized due to lack of sustenance that they need from the baby formula. And so there have been many analysts and pundits and people speculating and looking at policies and trying to figure out why this happens. And the general consensus, even amongst the most progressive among us, is the following: that government import rules, government restrictions, subsidies, for certain countries, all have, and the pandemic and supply crisis, all have conspired to create the perfect storm of this catastrophe. Let's go a little bit deeper, because I think there is significant philosophical import to understanding what's going on with the baby formula crisis. And guess what? This crisis was not unforeseen, and in fact, this crisis is actually wholly preventable. So, there are 4 companies that control the entire share of the baby formula market in the United States of America. And it's also worth mentioning that the United States produces its baby formula, and 98% of it comes from domestic firms, whereas only 2% of it comes from foreign firms. And those domestic firms it comes from are the following: Abbott, Mead Johnson, Nestle, and Perrigo. Those are the big four companies that control the production and distribution of baby formula in the United States. And they have an effective stranglehold over the market. Now, some populist amongst us, or some protectionist amongst us, might say, well, Christian, it's because they're too big to fail, or because they've gotten too big and they've drowned out competition. That's incorrect. The primacy of these 4 companies over the baby formula market is actually entirely artificially created. The big 4 benefit from a government welfare program called the Supplemental Nutritional Program for Women, Infants, and Children, oftentimes abbreviated as WIC. And that program essentially artificially hands a particular firm the rights to sell baby formula in a particular market at the exclusion of every single other firm. So these big 4 companies have these exclusive contracts with state governments that give them entire control over the baby formula market in certain states, which means there can be no competition. Now, if you look at the broader context, people mention the supply chain crisis. Well, indeed, the supply chain crisis caused by the pandemic, partially by the natural effects of having a novel virus, then the other part by the effects of government shutdown, led to people buying up a lot of baby formula in the beginning years of the pandemic, storing it in their houses, and then the firms that produce baby formula didn't have any idea of what the market was going to be like, since people were buying less, since they had stockpiled. Therefore, they produced less, and then when this year happened and the recall happened because of a reported salmonella or bacterial outbreak at at Abbott Nutrition's facilities, the supply was immediately exhausted because, again, they didn't know how much to make, because people's buying habits had changed drastically. The market's habits had indeed changed drastically, which has led people like Pete Buttigieg to say that this is a problem of production, not of supply. But that's ridiculous. Supply is the result of production, and it's also the result of trade. And this gets to another pillar of why this is happening. The United States market is closed off to foreign imports of baby formula. Indeed, if you want to import baby formula in the United States, you have to pay up to a 17.5% tariff. And if you import or export more baby formula than the limit allows, they will hit you with an additional charge. So that means low-cost baby formula that comes from places like Chile are not able to get into the United States effectively, because even if they get past the tariffs, the price will be jacked up, and so it's not really worth, these foreign producers to bring the formula to this country if they're not going to even make a profit compared to the competition they're already facing. So you have tariffs, which are freezing them out of the market. Then you also have the artificial propping up of 4 companies that the government has decided can provide people baby formula on the basis of social welfare. And then you also have the conditions of the market, scarcity, and all of it conspires to create this perfect storm. So Biden had to invoke the Defense Act to compel suppliers to make these 4 companies their primary priorities when it comes to getting ingredients to them. And also, he flew in several cases of baby formula, many tons, from foreign countries that create them. Also, it's important to note that the FDA has very particular nutritional requirements that put burdens on foreign importers, foreign exporters of baby formula, and also gets them out of the United States market. Now, there are parents, there's actually a surge of parents who don't want to have processed additives in their baby formula, which the United States baby formula has. They don't want high fructose corn syrup. They want to have organic additives. And so what they do is they illegally buy from European companies. And not only that, but when they try to buy from European companies, Customs and Border agents seize their assets. They seize the products. Over $30,000 worth of baby formula was seized in April coming in from foreign countries. Not because it was dangerous or anything, but because it goes against the established governmental rules governing baby formula. You have a Frankenstein created by government regulation. So the question is, what does one do about it? Because that's the speculation. And I think that a lot of people are missing the broader philosophical import for the minutia of what has happened. My friends, human activity, I like to say it's like a river. Human action and creativity is like a river. And it is the fundamental goal of governments not to quash human activity and creativity on the basis of the good or whatever other basis, but it is the goal of the government to allow human activity to have a context in which it can flourish without unnecessary or illicit inhibitions. This is the primary first principle role of a just government. Unfortunately, when governments go beyond that role, they actually happen to infringe upon human creativity and they create blockages. Think of it like a river, for example. So let's say that you have a river and a dam is constructed, and a dam creates a reservoir, and the reservoir looks pretty. The reservoir has plankton and all the kind of fish in it that were put there by the reservoir makers, and the dam is maintained by a few dam makers. Now, these dam makers who maintain the dam have every interest in making sure everything that occurs within the reservoir is governed and regulated according to their desires. Now, let us say you have a dam that is beginning to break and is beginning to fail, but the dam makers are interested in keeping the dam maintained, because if you don't do that, the reservoir will flood and it'll destroy all the villages at the bottom of the river. Okay, but the dam continues to break. There's cracks in the dam. And there are other people saying, well, perhaps we should abandon this project. Perhaps we just drain this reservoir and we should open up the river so it can flow naturally. But the people who maintain the dam have every interest in keeping their operation open because they personally benefit from it. The dam, in my analogy, is akin to government regulations, tariffs, import regulations, and nutritional regulations that restrict the flow of perfectly safe European baby formula from going to people. For a while, the reservoir is pretty and it can bring sustenance and fertility and fruit for the village below. But when the dam breaks, everything floods. And when everything floods, my friends, the village below is destroyed, the crops are destroyed, everything created by this artificial reservoir of water perishes. Not because the dam wasn't good enough, but because the dam restricted the principle, which should have never been restricted in the first place. It's not that the dam didn't do a good job, it's that the dam did a bad job by trying to do its job in the first place. Similarly, when government restricts trade between individuals, it's not that it did it the wrong way, it's that restricting trade in the first place is morally wrong, and not only is it morally wrong, it's principally wrong because human activity cannot flourish in the face of undue burdens and restrictions. The principle of scarcity in economics tells us this quite well, my friends, and it essentially says there is a scarce amount of things that we have in the world, and it is the duty, or it is the purpose and function of economics to trade and cultivate these scarce things between individuals. But when the government comes in and says, this scarce thing here will go this way, and they try to redirect this principle to their own need and their own gain, what happens? Calamity happens because they're violating natural order, the natural order of the universe. They're violating principles. The problem of the baby formula shortage, my friends, is not merely the problem of production, as Buttigieg put it. It is a problem of restricting human action and trying to curtail it and bend it to your will. That cannot happen without serious disaster because human creativity is not meant to be restricted. It's meant to flourish within morally proper bounds, and those morally proper bounds include protecting the rights of other people. But with this welfare system, the WIC program that gives these 4 companies wholesale control over the market and crushes competition with these import tariffs, makes it unprofitable for companies to put their product into this country, with these nutritional regulations, which make it essentially hard for these European firms to ship over here without going through excessive red tape. All of these things are the dam that chokes the river dry and eventually, or rather chokes the river up and eventually causes a flood to happen. And a flood is happening right now and it's destroying things. So there's been several solutions proposed to this. The Centers for American Progress, the progressives, they have a few solutions. One of them is to look at potential anti-competitive behavior amongst the Big Four, even though the Big Four are propped up by the government itself, so I'm not sure what the government's going to do. It's going to go back on its own ideas. The other goal is to streamline the entry process into the country for foreign firms. It's a good goal. Foreign firms should have an easier time selling their products. They should actually have a very easy time because there's no moral basis to restrict free trade between individuals. Another suggestion from the Centers for American Progress is to loosen federal restrictions on the formula that can be purchased with the WIC. So here's the thing. The Centers for American Progress want to have things that require the destruction of the dam, but they want to preserve the dam in the first place. You can't preserve the WIC, the welfare program, which essentially allows this artificial market and this choking out of resources to occur, and want more resources to come in. The dam either has to be broken or it has to stay, and if it stays, more destruction ensues. And this is the internal contradiction of progressivism. Progressivism wants to direct the flow of human energy and human creativity towards its selected aims, but when that becomes disastrous, they want to allow human energy to function properly, but they want it to function within their confines. You can't have it both ways. You either have to let human beings do things as they will, contractually and voluntarily, or restrict them entirely and see what happens. They also suggest that they want the USDA to have a certain amount of formula on hand so that if this happens again, they can just divvy it out. Well, the problem with that is, again, scarcity. And not only that, but they want this government to have a certain amount on hand, and they want to dole it out equitably because they're like, we should focus on the most vulnerable populations, LGBTQ folks and black folks, when distributing baby formula. Okay, we know what happens then. That means that some people are going to get it and some people will not get it. And if you have a certain amount of people who get it over other people, what happens? The crisis still occurs just for people you don't favor in your equitable program. Equity used to be about, in the 14th century, if you look at the etymology of the word equity, it was once about ensuring the principles of a natural justice. What is mine is thine, the fulfillment of contracts, the protection of rights, the keeping of what I already have as a part of my humanity. It was to fulfill that. Equity has now become this sort of social engineering tool used to divvy out benefits and resources to groups as opposed to individuals, or as opposed to any people on the basis of merit, just because those groups are assumed oppressed. But the problem is, if you divvy out resources to groups without even analyzing if the people in those groups need them, you're going to actually eat and destroy your own goals. But not only that, but equity, just like justice, is meant to be blind in its original conception. So when you do this kind of stuff, Citizens for American Progress, what you actually do is violate the principal foundations that your idea is supposed to rest upon. They're using a boogeyman of an original idea, the boogeyman of equity, to make even more monstrous conclusions. And of course, Congress recently passed 2 bills, one of which is a $28 million funding bill, which gives more money to the FDA. The FDA, the organ of the government which is restricting the flow of human creativity, which has essentially caused this crisis amongst many other actors. They want to give them more money, because the idea is that if you give them more money, and this is literally what they said, if you give them more money, they'll have more staff to process applications. The problem is not applications are not being processed. The problem is that for a long time, applications have been shut out, and they have been shut out by other forces created by government regulation. Of course, Biden is easing the import rules now, which is great, but unfortunately, what Biden is not doing, he is not easing the tariffs. And so long as it is hard for people to produce a profit on a very important product, and they are able to sell it at a low cost, as long as it's hard to do that, then guess what? They won't do it. Over the next 6 months, you're going to see government, again, allow a little inlet, like in a dam, little inlet to flow into the market, allow some sustenance to flow into the market, but they're still going to keep the dam there. And the dam has already burst, but the government is going to use whatever remnants of the dam they can to maintain their stranglehold over the domestic economy. What the Biden administration should do, if it was just at all, it should completely allow the dam to wash out, drain the flooded reservoir, and allow the river to flow as it may, not as they want it to. Allow complete and utter competition into the marketplace. Destroy the WIC program, abolish it entirely, and let poor families get cheap prices from producers from other countries who will give it to them because there's a market for them. Get rid of the FDA nutritional red tape. I'm not saying get rid of it entirely, but cut back on it, scale back on it, make it more reasonable. Allow competition to flourish, and do not allow the social welfare state and government monopolies and red tape and the administrative state to continue choking out the river, because the more you do that, the more floods and disaster will occur. Think on it. My friends, love you guys so much. If you love me, please support my Patreon, patreon.com/CWatson, or PayPal, officialcwatson@gmail.com. Please go to my Discord, which is in the comment section down below. Please like this video. Please share this video. Please subscribe to this channel. My friends, love you guys so much, and please stay pensive. Bye, guys.